Kevin, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you are a financial planner. I'm gonna just introduce you for our guests here. So we have Kevin Riley, and he works for LPL Financial. You've been a financial advisor now for how long?
For about 5 years.
5 years.
hmm
Awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wanted to have you on the show. A lot of our listeners, the goal is to have targeted first-time homebuyers that have not purchased a home, and financial planning has a lot to do with buying a home or even buying your first house.
Yeah.
And so, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Pete, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited about this, my first podcast. So, hopefully I don't jitter too much during it.
Oh no, you're good, man. Yeah, you're good. I really appreciate it, and we've actually known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah.
Lots of good laughs. Here,
Lots
Kevin.
of, lots of laughs. That's
Yeah.
for sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of get right into it. We got some
Yeah.
questions, and hopefully we can create some good content for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So the first question I have for you is the current economic conditions impact. So how do current economic conditions impact the decisions of first-time homebuyers? And oh, sorry, this is the last question. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
All
You're
right.
good.
Okay. So the first question, actually, to the listeners,
Yeah.
is what advice do you have for families starting out and creating a budget to save for their home? Down payment's a big part of buying a house.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the hardest things that require really a strong mental strength. Is there's four things. You need to see what your income is. Obviously, what you, and if you have a spouse, what your spouse, what's your
Yeah.
income? How much do you
Yeah.
guys make? The second thing you want to look at is expenses. I know that when I was looking for a house at one
Yeah.
point, I had student debt. I had a truck payment, whatever it was. You need to look at those expenses and debts as well in that same
Yeah.
scenario is credit card debt. That adds up
Yeah.
quick. You're paying 20% on credit cards. How are you
Yeah.
going to budget and save money? Which brings us to the last thing is
Savings.
Savings. Building savings account and just start putting money away.
Yeah. So I think a lot of families right now, it's hard to save.
Yeah.
It's tough. Any good practices on finding out, like figuring out how to save,
Mhm.
every single month. I have a lot of customers that, I hear their stories and I see what's happening, and it's very hard for them to save, and it's very easy to spend. Starbucks, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, all these things. So any best practices that you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely takes a mental strength and the fact of, a lot of times when people save or say they're saving, they get their paycheck and whatever's left they put away into savings, right?
Yeah.
We need to start switching around the mentality on that of saving and start saving first off that paycheck and then living off the rest.
And living off the rest.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
So what you're saying is when you get paid,
Mhm.
let's say I'm getting paid every 2 weeks,
Mhm.
the first thing I do is I save part of that before any bills get paid.
Yep. Yep.
What are some good practical ways of being able to do that?
Yeah, so there's this really common rule called the 50-30-20. And this rule is basically 50% is going to go to your needs, 30% to your wants, and then 20% to savings, right? They call it the 50-30-20.
50% to needs.
It's 50% towards your needs,
Okay.
30 to your wants, and then 20 to your savings.
Got it.
And honestly, realistically, I think a lot of people, I live paycheck to paycheck. Well, it's not that you live paycheck to paycheck. It's when you get paid more, you tend to spend more. So this mentality kind of gives you, hey, what should I put away for
I
that?
see.
And then, this 50-30-20 rule that might work for you, for the next guy, it might have to be, I have to do 70, 20-10. But as long as you start to build out your budget
Makes sense.
off of that rule and save first when your paycheck comes in,
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to budget that money.
No, I love that. So let's say someone gets a raise. Well, it's 50% of the raise as well. So as they're making more income, I think the statistic was last year nationally, wages went up about 8%.
Mm-hmm.
And so that 8% extra that they're saving, 50% of that is going to their needs, 30% to their wants, and 20%. And it goes up along with your income.
Correct.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So a very popular rule.
Yeah. And is there any kind of, when they do get the paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
I often tell customers to, hey, take an auto pay. Like for me personally, what I do is I have a separate account,
Mm-hmm.
and you can create multiple different types of accounts in the bank, but every time I get paid, I have a certain percentage that just sweeps right into the actual account. And I have multiple accounts, and I might create more accounts for if I'm saving for something. I'll just have it swoop right
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, no, that's smart. And what's funny about that is, is when you see your bank account, right, and you're like, oh, I get paid in 3 days. I have $100. I can't spend that. But if it comes out early, you're never going to see it. And that same mentality of, hey, I have
Yeah.
$100. That just means, hey, I can't go to Starbucks. Maybe
I love that.
I can't spend it on going to the movies. Hey guys, if we're going out for drinks, who's buying my drinks? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's
So
like what you said in the beginning. It's hard to do. It's a mental.
it's a mental
Discipline. It's
discipline.
it's
Yes.
discipline.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mental discipline. I like that. I said mental
Yeah.
strength. Mental discipline
Yeah.
is definitely what it is.
Okay, awesome. So next question is: are there specific? We actually covered this. Are there specific strategies or tools you recommend for effectively budgeting and savings? So we talked about the 50-30-20 rule.
Mm-hmm.
Make cuts to things that aren't necessary. $5 coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes back to the mentality of save first, spend later. Don't
Yeah.
wait till if you're waiting to the end to save what you got. You're going to save like $10, or you could save $1,000 depending on how you set it up.
Yeah. No, I like that. How important is having an emergency fund?
Yeah. No.
For
Very good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very important, extremely important. If you don't have an emergency fund, I think they say for a single person, you should have a 3 months emergency fund. For a married couple, it's 6 months. It's necessary. It's important. Life happens, right? Sometimes the unforeseeable happens.
Yeah.
Your car breaks down maybe, or you
Yeah.
lose a job, or whatever it is. There's a gap of income that you need to cover, whether that's your mortgage, your car payment, your kids,
Yeah.
dentist appointment, whatever it is that you're paying for. And
Yeah.
if you don't have that emergency savings saved up, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And so it's extremely important. And again, I know for single people, it's 3 months, but I say 6 months all around, even if, it's like, hey, you are single, or you're a single parent, or even if you're a family, I still say, hey, do 6 months.
Yeah, and would you? Yeah, 6 months is good. Would you recommend anyone that's wanting to buy a house to purchase a home before they have this emergency fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a tough one. I would say most people should have that set up right now. So even if they are a first-time buyer, a lot of times, you might see someone using that emergency cash as their down payment for a house.
Yeah.
Now, if they're able to build up, like let's say they have a 50-30-20 plan, and they're doing that 50-30-20 plan, they can build out that savings account again. And I would say keep building at it, but I would always, don't spend everything. Have some savings, because again, life happens.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and obviously you're a financial planner, and so your whole goal as a financial planner is to help people with long-term savings,
Right.
and be able to have some money set aside for when they do retire, for when they are not working anymore.
Correct.
And so you probably have seen trends with your database, with people having those savings plans and having those set aside. I guess what I'm getting at is that 20% is just super important.
Mm-hmm.
The 20% starting at a young age, can really help. A, the discipline, and B, by the time they do get retired. Obviously, buying a home and having a real estate goes along with that as well. Okay, so the next question here, just looking at my notes. So what factors should, talking about emergency funds, what factors should families consider when determining the size of their emergency fund?
Yeah, yeah, this is a good one because you might thinking, oh, hey, it's just my mortgage, but you might not think, oh, hey, I got car insurance, I got
Yeah.
to pay my utilities. I like to say, hey, whatever your current expenses are now, don't minimize them down, keep them the same. If anything, inflate those because
The expenses, yeah.
expenses are going up, right?
Yeah.
Inflation, we're going up, things are costing more.
Yeah.
So don't I don't know if gyp's the right word, but don't gyp yourself out of what you should be saving because you're like, oh, I want to have my 6 months, and you're a little under your 6 months. You're going to be in trouble if you're not saving or prepping on gas or
Yeah.
insurance or maybe it's, hey, it's back to school week this week and I got to go buy backpacks,
Yeah.
school supplies,
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
I didn't have this a part of my questions, but I'm going to bring it up.
Okay.
So kind of shooting from the cuff.
All right.
So with variable income, so
Mhm.
like my income is variable,
Mhm.
and my income can be, more or less depending on, the month and how many loans I'm closing because I get paid, per loan.
Yeah.
Same for someone else or someone's self-employed. So what are some strategies that you've seen work for someone that has variable income? So
Mhm.
income can go up and income come down. For me, what's worked for me is obviously just keeping my budget lower,
Yeah.
and when times are really, really good. At a younger age, I spent like crazy when I was making money, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden when the market turned, I was like, "Oh man, this is not good."
Yeah, that's a good question. It goes back to that mental strength,
Yeah.
that mental discipline is, yeah, it's nice when you get a big commission check. You're like, sweet, I'm buying everyone drinks, or whatever
Right.
it might be.
Yeah.
But I think if you go back to that 50-30-20 rule, if you do 50% on your needs or what,
Yeah.
maybe that month you can reverse it to where it's, hey, 20% is going towards my needs. 30% still going to my wants, and hey, 50% is going to go into my savings.
I see. Yeah.
So
Yeah. When
yeah,
you do have that bigger check than normal
yeah,
coming out.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just adjust the numbers, and play with it. And that's why I say, the 50-30-20 rule, for some people, it could be the 60-20-10 or whatever, that didn't even make up to 100, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It could be
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
than that. So,
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I hear you.
mhm.
So regarding the mortgage,
Mhm.
and when it comes to savings and planning for retirement, this could be a hard thing for buyers to navigate, for their retirement, for their savings, for their mortgage, for their housing expense. So, what key considerations should first-time home buyers keep in mind when selecting a mortgage loan?
Yeah, yeah. So this is gonna fall probably more on yours, but we run into this often, and interest rates are one thing that pop up. Obviously, oh, interest rates are up. I'm gonna wait to buy.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't necessarily be something that you base your answers on. But interest rates, you don't have any control over that.
Yeah.
So if ever that did come up, I'd say, hey, talk to Pete. But the other thing in a popular financial guy in the
Yeah.
world would say, hey, save 20%. Save 20%, which is a great mark.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes not attainable. So see
You're
what
saying 20% to put down.
to put down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why 20%?
That's just again, it's just a common theme. It puts you basically you get out of and again, Pete, you know better than I.
Yeah.
That was it PMI, which is that
Mortgage insurance. Yeah.
mortgage insurance, which
Yeah.
will save you. Your payments will be lower.
Yeah.
Even if you have high interest rates, it's
Yeah.
not going to seem like, hey, I'm paying an arm and a leg
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah.
So you avoid PMI, and then you at least build some equity quicker in that. You already have put in that 20%.
I love it. I definitely love that kind of added strategy or recommendation. I do like it. There's a lot of buyers that still think they have to put the 20% down, that they have to be able to save that 20%. And I fall on more of the affordability. In other words, if you don't have 20% down, I still think it's a great way to build wealth, a great way to be able to get into your home as long as it fits within their budget.
Correct.
and as long as they can afford it, because the mortgage insurance, I have a whole training on mortgage insurance of how that works, but I don't know. Have I ever told you mortgage insurance how it was created?
No, no.
So mortgage insurance, before the 1920s, sorry, before the 1930s, the Great Depression, there was no such thing as a first-time home buyer. There's no such thing as 5% down. Anyone that bought a house, they had to put 20% down. The banks wouldn't lend to anyone unless you put 20% down. So this is the way it was before the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same today, actually. So like no bank will lend to you unless you put 20% down. The only difference that happened was after 1930, they said, hey, let's create a way to help homeowners be able to buy more homes, because they wanted to help the economy. They wanted to help people get into homes. And so they said, let's create an insurance policy for the banks.
Nice.
So the banks basically said, okay, we'll lend someone less than 20% down, even up to 100%. However, they pay an insurance policy in case they default.
Wow.
So it allows a buyer to get into the home without having to put that 20% down.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think that it's smart to have 20, but I also think it's smart to still buy if you don't have the 20%. I mean, that's the most conservative. I think Dave Ramsey is a big proponent. Have you heard of Dave Ramsey?
I know the name. Like I refer to a big financial guy.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
yeah.
yeah.
So Dave Ramsey, he's a big proponent of putting 20% down, and I don't necessarily follow that narrative, just because there's hundreds of stories of families that have bought, including myself. I mean, when I bought my first house, I bought my first house in 2021, 2022. And I did an FHA loan and I had mortgage insurance. I didn't save 20%, but 3-4 years later, I had about $100,000 of equity that had grown. And if I would have waited to save the 20%, that would have been great. But I would have missed out on jumping in the market during that time.
Well, and think too, to play on that alongside of that is, if let's say you do an FHA, which I think is 3.5, right, to go in, it's kind of a cool thing if you put 3.5 in. Look at what rent is today. People are paying buku dollars to be renting, and if you can get a mortgage for cheaper than your rent, even if you don't have the 20% down, that is a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go here. So next question I have for you, Kevin, is are there any common misconceptions about mortgages that you often come across in your financial planning practice, long-term financial planning?
Yeah, and it kind of plays into this last thing about the rent is they don't make enough to own a house. I remember the first time someone's like, "Hey, why don't you buy a house?" I started laughing. I was like, I don't make enough. I didn't realize, what exactly I was diving into, and they're like, "Well, how do you know?" And I was like, "Well, because I'm not, a doctor or a lawyer or an attorney. I can't." And the misconception is, you think I'm living that paycheck to paycheck life or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that what you're basically paying in this rent, you could be paying on a mortgage.
Right.
And so that's why seeing someone like a lender, like Pete, like you, and talking with them, you totally could see what you qualify for.
Right.
And by seeing what you qualify for, you might be able to, be able to afford a house. And the misconception again is, oh, I can't do that. And it goes back to even budgeting of that mental discipline. You just got to, it's a block. It puts a block in your head that you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I follow Shasta County, our local market, pretty good on kind of like the demographics. So we have about 180,000 people in Shasta County. And out of the 180,000 people, there's about 62% of us that are homeowners. Mm-hmm. So 62% of the population actually own a home. The other 38% are renters, right? Well, of the 38%, there's another percentage of that actually make the money to be able to buy, that actually are paying higher rent, but don't realize they can actually buy a home. So based on the average income in Shasta County and based on the percentage of homeownership here, there's about 16,000 families that actually qualify to be able to buy, and our average purchase price or
Wow.
average price of a home. And so a lot of it is like what you're saying is the common misconception is I don't know that I can qualify. I don't
Yeah.
know that I make enough money. And it's an interesting, you know, I guess I'm like, curious of like why this is,
Yeah. I don't know. Could it be a fear or, I think it's a lot of it's just not knowing, a lot of not educated.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I want to buy a house, but, no one knows how. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we run into a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. So the next question is, how can families balance their short-term financial goals, like purchasing a home, with long-term financial planning for things like education and retirement?
Oh, that's a good one. I like to think about um, basically building out your long-term goals like going on a trip, right? When you go
Mm,
on a trip, you don't just get in the car and drive, right? You either put it in a GPS, you map it out, right? If you just jump in the car, yeah, you might get there eventually, but you're going to make wrong turns, you're going to go a
yeah,
left, right? And so you get the GPS. Now, when you're going on these trips, occasionally what road work ahead, right? A detour,
oh,
take a detour,
yeah,
right? That's the same concept that we're going to see in buying a home or retirement or
planning
education.
the retirement, yeah,
Exactly. Like you have this plan to go here, but occasionally there's going to be, hey, you're going to have to make an alternative plan.
yeah,
You're going to have to change the direction. Still the same goals, but just a
yeah.
different way to get there.
No, I love that.
So definitely mapping it out is the
Yeah,
key. So
yeah, I love that. It's kind of like a plan. It's like writing the plan down. So if I don't map out where I'm going, then I'm just kind of driving, trying to get to the place. Like I I know of this place that I'm going. Let's say Disneyland.
hmm
I need to go south, but I'm gonna go south, and then what? Like what's the plan? How do I
hmm
get there? So yeah, I love that. So what are some so do you help your clients write down this plan?
Yeah, no. So again, whether it's education or
Yeah,
retirement, that's more so what I do. Like, on that education plan,
yeah,
we'll take a look at, hey, your kid's going to be graduating high school in 14 years. What's
yeah,
inflation, the cost of that? What do we need? Or for retirement, you want to
yeah,
retire at 65 and you want to spend X, Y, Z. How much are
yeah,
you saving? You know,
yeah,
with buying a house, it's the same way.
yeah.
You can't, like you said, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go buy a house. You have to build up savings. Like we said, you don't want to use your emergency savings
Right.
on this. You want to put away that save, you want to
Hmm.
save and have a plan. And
Yeah,
like we're saying, because if you don't have a plan, you might not end up at buying
yeah,
a house or retirement
yeah.
or, education
So like when
providers.
I put my GPS in,
hmm
I have to constantly look at it
Yeah.
to actually get one. I can't look at it once and be like, oh, I know exactly how to get there. There's gonna be
hmm
like 4 or 5 turns, 6 turns maybe of where I'm going, and so like if I have a plan, if I have a goal, I have to look at that goal every day. I have to
hmm
like get it in my brain on what my plan is, and so that I can actually execute that plan.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Spot on.
yeah,
Spot on.
I
Yeah.
love that. Cool. Okay, let's see. What roles does homeownership play in a family's overall financial plan? Would you
Uh,
say?
this is a good one. And I thought there's so many routes I wanted to go with this, so
Yeah.
I thought I'd keep it basic. There's two types of assets, right? There's
Okay.
appreciating and depreciating, right? A depreciating asset would be like, hey, I want to go buy a truck, right? The value of it's going down. Um,
Ford F-150.
Ford F-150, they go down quicker.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You got to think about a house as an appreciating asset. All
Yeah.
right. So this helps the financial plan because this helps build your net worth. As you pay this down, it increases your net worth. It increases your spending power, and
Mhm.
eventually the goal is you pay your house off in 30 years. A lot of people tend to
Yeah.
move before that 30 years is up, but
Yeah.
to those that get it paid off, if this is a part of, hey, my goal in retirement to spend X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
you don't want to have a mortgage. You don't want to
Right.
be paying stuff on that. The goal is to have it paid off so you
Yeah.
live scot free. Well, insurance and taxes, but
Right.
for the most part, you're not spending. So
Yeah.
it is a appreciating asset to have, And the other thing too is, and you wouldn't see this probably more than I is, people that want to upgrade their homes, generally, if they're going to upgrade their homes, um, they're going to need to have a house, right? You can't, unless you're making a very significant amount of money to qualify for houses like really nicer houses are 700 up right now. To qualify for that, you're gonna need to be making probably 200,000 or 300,000, something like that. I don't know. You would know better than I.
For how long or how much of a
For
house?
700 plus.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But if I had a house that let's say is now worth 500,000 that I owed 400 or owed 100 on,
Yeah.
you're in a better position.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
it helps you get into the next house. It gets you in the
Yeah.
next house. Or when you retire, it helps you not have a house payment.
Yeah.
And you're basically your costs are minimal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So there's so many ways I could talk about this, with financial planning and retirement with home ownership. There's so many ways that it can fit in. Real estate has been one of the number one wealth building tools in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
So most billionaires made their wealth from real estate.
Yeah.
And so when buying a home, like what you're saying, it's kind of I always say that it's a forced savings account.
Yeah.
Part of that mortgage is paying down the balance of the home.
Yeah.
And if you want to buy multiple homes, then the renter is now paying down that mortgage, and just slowly by surely, you're building wealth.
Yeah.
By paying down that mortgage. And then obviously real estate. I was talking to someone earlier today. This is another statistic that I follow, is the last 81 years. Guess how many years out of the last 81 years has real estate declined?
Ooh, on average or in a single year?
And out of 81 years, how many of those years since 1941, since they've been tracking, how many of those years did real estate actually decline?
I don't know.
It's staggering. 7 years only.
Is that it? Wow, that's a lot.
And so 5 of those years, from 2007
Mm-hmm.
to I believe 2011, 2012, 5 of those years. And 2 of those years was in 1990 and 1991. Well, 1990 and 91, real estate actually declined 0.1%.
Yeah.
And it was like and then 1% in 1991.
Jeez.
So it's not like it was like a huge drop. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like a crash. So real estate, when planning for retirement, is an absolute incredible way to help retirement. It is an absolute great way to build wealth for the family.
And I think you hit it on the head too. Is you're paying yourself. You're not. You think you're not buying a home. You're paying yourself. It's a savings account. I think it's a good mentality to think of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Okay. Let's see. How can families navigate potential financial risks associated with homeownership? This is a good one.
Yeah. And I think we kind of covered this. Is 6 months emergency cash.
Yeah.
That's going to come up. Your AC unit's going to come out. These are just natural things. The thing is, if you don't have this emergency cash, what are you relying on? You're relying on, hey, I have a 401k, maybe I'll pull for that. Which is, again, I would never recommend that, because you're giving up all this compounding interest that you basically are saying, hey, I'm going to work longer, or I'm going to spend less. It might be, I'm going to downgrade my car, sell your car. Again, it's a depreciating asset. So you're not going to get what you got out of it into it, or what you got put into it. You're not going to get out of it when you sell it, because it's a depreciating asset. So again, I think the biggest thing is that 6 months emergency cash. Have that.
You mentioned 401k, and for our listeners, they may not understand, because a lot of our listeners might have a 401k and it might be contributing for 401k. And of course, you can use this as an emergency. But what happens if someone needs to access that 401k?
Yeah. So if you access it, first it counts as income for that year. So it could bump you in a tax bracket, which not only would that money be taxed at a higher rate, but so would your salary.
The salary could be bumped as well into a higher tax bracket because it's the total income that they made.
And if you pull before 59.5, there's also an additional 10% penalty. So it's just let it grow, let it sit there. Another one of those savings accounts, you just put it into it and let it grow, because again, Otherwise, you're going to tax and it's going to mess with your income. And for older clients too, depending on how much you take, it could mess with the amount of Social Security you get.
Interesting.
By how much you take out. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of off the cuff as well.
Okay.
And so maybe you can answer this. Maybe I know there's some regulation around it, but for 401k, so like I do have a lot of clients that have these old 401k loans from a previous employer, and they have worked for, let's say, UPS or something for 5 years, and then they go and work for, let's say, FedEx or another company. Well, they still have this 401k. And they don't have anyone helping them manage this. Can you help with 401ks, or how does that work?
Yeah. So if someone has a 401k and it's at their previous employer, that's what we love to do. We want to help put it into a investment tool and help build out that, how we were talking about mapping out a plan.
Yes.
We want to map out a plan for them. We want to help them hit retirement. My main goal is I want to see people succeed. I want them to all retire and live happy and, have a house built on Lake Shasta. If it could be
nice.
And so when you have these old 401ks or if you don't know what's going on, because you're like, I think it's at some employer, I don't know, is you aren't paying attention to your funds and you just want to do that. You wouldn't buy a home and then be like, oh, I think I have a house in Anderson somewhere. You would be like, oh, I have this. And by knowing what you have, you can then build out your whole plan, whether it's retirement.
So you'll actually help people write out their plan, like we were talking about.
Correct.
The navigation.
So that's the main goal. We want to build that map. And if home buying is one of the things that they want to do, we say, hey, let's look at this. If they say, hey, we have a lot of debt, we'll say, there's two different approaches to paying off debt. We'll say, hey, let's get debt out of debt.
Yeah.
And let's look, at saving, because some of these credit cards are charging 20% interest per year, and it's insane. And so
the credit card debt right now is all-time high. Just went over $1 trillion, and also the savings. So the credit card is getting higher. It's the most it's ever been, and the savings is the least. It's I don't know if it's the least it's ever been, but it's pretty low. It's getting lower and lower the last couple of years, and I think it's and we are in dire need of people like yourself. To help. I think a lot of it is just education.
Oh yeah.
And discipline.
Yeah, discipline. That is the most difficult thing people struggle with is the discipline. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What's the next question we have? Are there any specific strategies or considerations for families looking to leverage their home for future financial goals?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I think you would probably be able to hit more on the head on this. But there are times when refinancing, they do refinance cash outs. There's HELOCs. I've even seen how reverse mortgages could benefit people. Which that's one of those things too. How they have that fear of, oh, I can never buy a home. There's also a fear behind reverse mortgages. But all this goes back to being well educated on what it is before you dive into it. And that's where coming and talking to a pro like you.
Well, I agree. I would also add to that, Kevin, is that they have a team. Have their mortgage guy and a financial planner and also maybe an accountant to help them navigate a lot of this stuff, because you're right, there are misconceptions about reverse mortgages, and it's an amazing tool for someone that's 75, 78 years old. I talk to them on a weekly basis, this types of situations where they didn't have that savings, going through life. They didn't actually have that savings. However, you know what they did do? They paid down their mortgage.
Yeah.
And that mortgage, and now they have lots of equity in their home. And some of them are free and clear. Some of them have a very low balance. And now what happens is at this age, they need help. They need care. They need help. And they're looking for answers. Well, this is another financial tool that a home can provide in retirement years, because a reverse mortgage basically takes that mortgage to where they don't have a mortgage payment anymore. They still have the tax and insurance, of course, but they don't have a mortgage payment on a reverse mortgage, and so it's for the rest of their life. And
Yeah.
So I educate. I've education courses that talk about the reverse mortgage
Yeah.
as well.
Well, and I think you hit on the head. Have a team. No, you're well versed in this. So I mean, if someone came to me, I'd be like, hey, come talk to my buddy Pete. And there's a reason for that. Is the people that we surround ourselves in, our professional world are people that we actually trust. We don't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to send you off to a lender that I don't know, or someone. It's going to be someone. Hey, I trust this person with my mortgage.
Yeah.
You did do my mortgage.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that plays in is going to these people that recommendation. Obviously, these people trust them, but it's getting educated, knowing about it, and by getting educated about it, you're going to be in a better position to make better decisions, which go back to the whole mapping it out.
Yeah. I think about just every family that I've helped, and some have the financial planner and the mortgage guy, the accountant, the CPA, all of it. But I mean, imagine a world where every single person had someone they trusted that they could bounce. They have a financial planner they trusted. Hey, Kevin, what do you think about this? My kids are going to school. Should I get some student loans? Like, what do you think about this? I got this 401k. It's like so many questions in life, and these families, they're just going off of what they know best, and it's not anyone's fault, I guess. It's just they don't know what they don't know, I guess, and that's why having that team is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Next question we got here. How do current economic conditions? This was the first question that I asked.
Yeah.
How do economic conditions impact the decisions of first-time home buyers, and what should they be aware of?
Yeah. Interest rates. Oh man.
Yeah.
Interest rates. They create a lot of fear.
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned, but back in the 70s, I think interest rates were like 30%, which is crazy to think about. Obviously house prices were lower, but
income was lower too.
Income was lower too. But I think there's a graph. I don't hold me to this, but there's a graph that shows how home prices have increased and how salaries or income has.
Yeah.
And home prices
it's not the same.
Exactly.
Affordability is getting more and more challenging.
Exactly.
Yeah. The affordability spread is getting thicker and thicker and thicker. And I don't want to say that to scare people, because it's each person is different. Each person is different, and you put down your goal and you look to achieve that goal. As far as the interest rates, you're right. It does scare. It has scared a lot of people. And my take on that is, is it affordable? Can you afford the payment? Can you afford to save also monthly with that new mortgage payment?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I'd agree for sure.
Yeah.
And if you're planning on holding the home for longer than 5 years, go for it. And again, that's not a recommendation or anything. But
yeah.
Don't recommend it.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna hold this house longer, go get the house. You can always refinance.
Sure.
You can always do that. If it's affordable, you have your emergency cash.
Yeah.
Just be smart. Have your 50, 30, 20 plan, or whatever your current plan is.
Yeah.
Make sure it fits into your budget.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing on the interest rates. Another misconception is, people think that because interest rates are high, we're going to have a crash.
Mm-hmm.
They think that home values are going to crash, and my take on that is I don't think that we're going to have a crash. I think that real estate's going to continue to do well, just because of the current value, or sorry, not current, the current demand and how much supply we have for on the market. Like with your statistic here in the 70s, 30%. In 1981, interest rates were at 18%. And what do you think home values appreciated to? Like 5 or 6 years before 1981, interest rates were around 6 to 8%. 5 or 6 earlier, 6 years
crazy.
earlier.
Yeah.
So what do you think home values did in 1981, 1982?
When interest rates went up
to 18%. Yeah.
They probably came down, right?
No, they appreciated.
No way.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Home values went up.
Wow.
Yeah, and the reason why is the supply and demand. It wasn't necessarily that it wasn't necessarily, because rates are higher, it means
Yeah.
we have a crash. And so, but in 2007, interest rates were higher, but interest rates came down. We still had the crash. So it's not all towards the rate,
Right.
as far as, but, that plays a decision on, that's why I say if you can afford the payment and it fits within your budget, go for it. Like what you're saying, if this is going to be a long-term play, like if someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm going to only own this house for a year, then I would say, hey, probably not the best time, to buy and sell in a year. If they came to me in 2021, I'd say, yeah, not a bad move, but
Right.
right now, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So, are there regional or national trends that families should consider when entering the housing market?
No, I like this question. I got a good response. Okay. Have you heard of the herding concept?
No.
Okay. So
Hurting.
herding. So it basically people do as everyone else does,
Mm.
right? So if you were to say everyone is refinancing right now, well, in your head you think, oh, I have to be refinancing. Remember when
Oh,
we
I
had the
see.
big refinance boom?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, I got to refinance too. I
Yeah.
don't know what mine is. I'm 5%, but I got to get it down to 3%.
Yeah.
If you hear, oh, now's a bad time to buy, everyone thinks, oh, now's a bad time to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this herding effect or concept that people have. So I don't think there's like a national trend.
Would you say FOMO?
It could be
Fear of missing out.
it could be a FOMO, absolutely. And what's crazy is people are not buying right now because they're like, oh, interest rates are high. I'm going to wait for them to come down.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our last question is if you can afford the house, don't get into this herding concept of,
Yeah.
oh, interest rates are high. I'm not going to
Yeah.
buy. Because you know what? It might be good for you. And a lot of times that's why I say, whatever the trends are, I kind of just push away from it and say, hey, what's good for you right now? And it goes back to, talking with a person that's a professional for
Yeah.
you, because you can take a generalized, concept and apply it to yourself, or you can build that back to the map, personalized map
Right.
to you.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, though, they fall into that herding concept and they tend to get cold feet.
I have.
Yeah, I have.
I've got, on the opposite side. By the way, this is not financial advice.
Yeah.
But I had FOMO on Bitcoin,
Mhm.
and I bought Bitcoin, and I lost my ass on it.
Mhm.
And Bitcoin is doing what it's doing, but right now it's just not for me. Because I had the FOMO, and I kind of, I had the national trends. Everyone's into this thing, and da 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 da. But I didn't really take it. I didn't really have personal conviction on why I was buying,
Yeah.
Bitcoin. But I think to your point is follow your plan.
Follow
There's
your plan.
so many shiny objects that can happen. Oh, I got to do this and I got to do this. Find your plan every day. Like look at your plan and follow the plan.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, and it goes back to the, and just on the shiny things, also the bad things. Well, how many times have I heard, oh, the housing market's going to crash for the last 2 years?
Yeah.
And so you talk to anybody, hey, are you going to buy a house? No, the housing market's going to crash in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And you talk to them and say, what does it mean for the housing market to crash? And they're like,
Not sure.
I don't know, but it's going to crash in 2 years and I don't want to be in it. And so it's good as there are shiny things, the bad things.
The
So
other things. Both.
they move.
So what you're saying, Kevin, is to stay in your lane. Stay with your plan. I love that. So the most important thing that I've gotten out of this podcast is stay in my plan.
Yeah.
I have a plan. I'm gonna stick to it, and I'm not gonna deviate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spot on. Spot on. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's see. Financial education for first-time homebuyers. Any good advice on just more education that first-time homebuyers, maybe some resources?
Yeah. No, it's funny because as we keep going, everything just lines up. Well, I like when that comes out.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like a resource or tool meant for one person. We're all authentic in our own personalities, our own goals, our own things we strive for.
Yeah.
Similar with, tools for building your finances, buying a home is meet with a lender, meet with a realtor, meet with an advisor, meet with, these professionals and build a plan personalized to you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So I always ask. I think that was one of our last questions, but I always ask every guest that comes on is to tell their story of how they bought their first house.
Yeah.
And are you okay with sharing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So heed all of my advice I just gave, so this is what happened. I had just moved back to Reading in 2018, right after the car fire, I believe.
Mm.
And so house
You moved back from
from Texas,
Texas.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I was looking for a house to buy, and well, I wasn't really looking, but a realtor was like, "Hey, why don't you buy a house?" And I'm like, I went with that misconception.
Oh.
I don't make enough
Yeah.
to buy a house. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I like renting.
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, you can do it. Meet with my guy." And I was like, "Okay,
Wow.
I'll meet with." And I met with a lender, and he showed me how much I could afford. And I'm just like, "This is crazy.
Wow.
I can buy a house for this many hundreds of thousands of dollars." And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I'm like, "How? Like, how does that make sense? I don't make."
Yeah.
And so what it did is it opened my eyes, saying, "Hey, it opened my eyes and said, hey, there are options for you."
Yeah.
And so I again, my very eager newest realtor who was like, "Hey, let's go buy you a house. Let's go buy a
Yeah.
house." And so and it's funny. One of the things was, don't go sell your truck to buy a house. Well, I went and sold my truck and I bought a house.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
not bad. That's not bad.
So, but yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
did. Is
You sold your truck, and because you sold the truck, you had the money for the down, or
for the down, exactly. And
Okay.
then I ended up buying a more cost effective car.
I see.
And so it was nice. And at the
Yeah.
time I was commuting over to Weaverville.
Oh,
So
I see.
so it worked
Yeah.
out well for me. So,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
that's how I got it. Yeah. So
Nice.
mhm.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much
Yeah.
for joining us, and I'm super thankful for the time we spent.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is fun. I know I'm hoping to start podcasts in the future, but this
Yeah.
was a good little getting my toes wet, so I
Nice.
appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah.